So I wanted to make this video about fitness and obviously why it's quite relevant to dating, etc. Because obviously the majority of the information is all about, the social skills aspect and, the confidence and anxiety aspect. But yeah, obviously fitness, your image, your kind of your aesthetic value that you're bringing to the opposite sex is obviously going to get judged. And, I'm always a massive advocate of doing what you can to optimize your looks. It's going to be massively beneficial in the dating game. So yeah, fitness is a key component of that, I think. So going to the gym, working on building a better physique is going to be massively beneficial. So yeah, I wanted to give some information on that really, especially if you're out there and you're considering getting into it, or you're kind of on the fence about it. I would definitely recommend getting into it for sure. But it's not a requirement, it's not absolutely essential, but it does have its benefits. So this is what this video is about really. Firstly, the way to kind of look at it is that, like, when you decide to get into it, it's essentially a commitment from day one. You have to be committed to doing it like every week without any kind of any excuses essentially. If you think like, oh, I'll just do it for a month or two and then get in shape, it's pointless. Don't even bother. Just there's no point getting into it. It's essentially a commitment for the foreseeable future, as soon as you decide to do it. Because the problem is that if you spend like a few months on it and then you take like a few months off, you're going to regress massively, and all that hard work that you've done before is just going to go out the window, and then you're going to have to start over again and again. It's just so essentially you've got to commit from day one and just integrate it into your life essentially. But yeah, the benefits are there obviously. Like I said, it has a massive impact on your physical attractiveness. It will improve you by maybe 1 or 2 points, and also like beyond that, it's really beneficial for your mental health as well. It has massive mental benefits. I know, like for myself, I find it quite therapeutic. It really kind of has like almost like a meditative kind of effect on me in a way. It's really kind of like clears my mind and enables me just to kind of focus on the present moment. And it's really beneficial mentally, obviously, as well as physically. And even just beyond just kind of like building a more aesthetic body, like physically, it just kind of makes you feel more alive. Like it's because like we spend so much of our time just sat on our asses, consuming content or working or whatever it is, watching TV, on the laptop, sitting down on our phones, whatever. We live very sedentary lifestyles just generally, in the modern world with all the technology, etc. So actually going out there and doing some like heavy physical activity is really beneficial, like just from a very kind of like biological perspective. Having that effect on your body is good. It gets the blood pumping, it gets you into a more kind of state of being actually properly alive, in my opinion. So so when it comes to getting into the gym, obviously like the first focus I guess would be what you're actually doing in the gym. In my opinion, like what I try to do is I try to do a combination of strength resistance training as well as cardio. The reason why I like to do cardio as well is because I don't just want to become physically stronger. I want to be fitter as well, like physically fit, because if you're strong and you're not fit, it just seems a bit pointless to me. So now I'm going to go and do a bit of cardio, because like I said before, for me, doing cardio is just as important as lifting heavy weights, because I want to be in a good condition, like physically, and like a more like in an overall kind of capacity. So like, yeah, I want to be physically fit. So for me, the bare minimum is like 15 minutes of running once a week, and that will maintain a half decent level of fitness with cardiovascular stuff. So that's what I'm going to do now, and it's literally just running on a treadmill for 15 minutes. And that's as simple as that. No one really likes cardio that much, and that's understandable. It can feel like uncomfortable, running for like hours and hours. No one really wants to do that. But if you do the absolute minimum in per week, which in my opinion would be like 10 minutes of running relatively decent pace for 10 minutes a week on the treadmill, that's it. That's all you need, really. So like you don't have to spend like hours and hours doing like multiple marathons per week. You don't have to do that. It's just about kind of like having and maintaining a decent, reasonable level of fitness, which you could do just like running on the treadmill for like 10 minutes a week. You can do a bit more, let's say 15 minutes, but I'd recommend doing that just for general physical fitness. But then when it comes to actual kind of resistance training, what I mean by that is essentially just lifting heavy weights in the gym. You want to kind of cover like all the areas of the body, so your shoulders, your chest, your biceps, triceps, legs and back. So those would be the main areas, maybe your abs as well, maybe. So what you kind of want to focus on is developing some kind of regime or training program that covers all of those areas at least once per week, ideally twice per week. So if you can hit every single muscle group like twice per week, that's like optimal for like the most or like the fastest kind of progress. But the minimum really is once per week. So like you want to be following a program that hits every single muscle group once per week. I'm not going to go into massive detail about like exact training programs, but you can search on the internet for that kind of stuff. There's lots of different options with that stuff, but obviously it's got to fit in with your lifestyle as well. So like you need to decide whether you want to go to the gym like 5 times a week or 3 times a week or even twice a week. You've got to find something that kind of works for you. Because it can be done, but the main thing is that you're following a decent training program that covers all the areas of the body. That's quite important, I would say. I'm not going to get into massive detail in this video about like the specific exercises to do for each muscle group, but I would say like try to focus mainly on the compound lifts, and what that means is like these are like the big heavy lifts that work multiple muscle groups. And kind of stimulate, a lot of muscle growth because they're quite heavy, heavy and intense lifts, as opposed to isolation lifts, which are more kind of targeted towards specific muscles, so like bicep curls, for example. But yeah, so the main compound lift would be squats, deadlifts, chest press, shoulder press, and rows, barbell rows or some other kind of row, dips, pull-ups, that kind of thing, because these essentially work multiple muscle groups. So yeah, when it comes to shoulders, you've got the shoulder press, which is essentially just pressing upwards with like a pair of dumbbells or with like a bar, and then just like lifting it over your head. That mainly focuses on the front part of your shoulder, and then for the side part of the shoulder you've got lateral raises, and then for the rear part of the shoulder you've got essentially rear delt flies or some kind of similar exercise to that. For the chest you've got the chest press or bench press, and then you can also do push-ups as well. That's pretty good as well. You've got incline bench press, which is like slightly more sort of targeted towards the upper region, and then for back you've got rows, but you essentially for back you want to like focus on one kind of horizontal pull as well as one sort of vertical pull. So like one kind of horizontal pull and then one kind of vertical pull, at least as a bare minimum. Doing kind of like 2 of each of those would be probably more ideal if you can, like different variations that would hit the muscles kind of differently. And then for legs you've got the squats and deadlifts. Deadlifts also does a bit of back as well, and then obviously you can do more with the legs as well, like leg press, the specific stuff that targets the quads and the hamstrings, etc., and also the calves as well. All this isolation stuff. So yeah, I would recommend a combination of isolation stuff as well as compound stuff. So, but this video is quite limited to talk about that stuff in like massive detail. So you're better off kind of looking at actual, YouTube channels or on the internet with more detailed information. I would recommend a couple of channels which are really good and do provide good quality information on this stuff. There's one guy called Sean Naliwani or something. I can't pronounce his name, but he's really good. He's very, very scientific in the way that he communicates information, and you can really learn a lot about this kind of stuff with his stuff. There's also a guy called Jeff Nippard who does even more kind of in-depth scientifically backed information on this stuff. So he's very good as well. Then there's a bunch of other good ones out there, but there's also a lot of bullshit out there on the internet with these fitness YouTubers. So you have to be a little bit careful about the information out there. But yeah, these two guys are really, really good. You can't really go wrong with these two guys, I would say. So yeah, so once you kind of figured out your kind of regime for the actual training in the gym, you've got to combine that stuff with the food. So the stuff you're actually eating, because that's equally, that's equally as important. Because if you're doing one without the other, then it's pointless essentially. And yeah, the thing with food is that like you are most likely going to have to make some sacrifices in terms of what you eat and how much, because if you're serious about getting into the good shape, then yeah, sacrifices do need to be made. And like I said before, it's one of these things that you have to commit from day one, and if you're not prepared to do that, then you might as well not even bother. But yeah, essentially with food, the first thing is, well, decide what your kind of current aims are. So like if you're like a skinny guy and you just want to kind of bulk up and build muscle, then that's fairly straightforward. But if you're a guy who's, let's say, a bit fat, then you might want to consider losing the fat first before kind of going into starting to build muscle. And likewise, if you're a skinny fat, so essentially you've got like a skinny frame but a fair amount of body fat and a bit of a belly, that kind of thing, then you can actually start lifting from the get-go as well, and you can be in what's known as a caloric deficit, but bear in mind that you're going to get, and you can build muscle that way, like initially, but it's going to get to a point where you won't be able to carry on like that forever, and you will have to start bulking. But hopefully by that point you would have put on some muscle whilst losing fat at the same time. So that's kind of like the theory behind that. So yeah, so firstly it's kind of like figuring out what what your kind of aims are, and generally having an idea of what you're trying to do in terms of like losing weight, putting on weight, etc. Bear in mind that you can't put on, for most people, at least, once you've kind of got past the very early days, you can't put on muscle without putting on weight. So generally speaking, as you put on muscle, you're going to still be putting on fat at the same time. So that's why there's these cycles of bulking and cutting. So bulking essentially means putting on weight. So the idea is you build muscle, you also get fat, put on a bit of fat at the same time. And then cutting is, the idea is that you're trying to lose weight, but you've already built up some muscle prior, but you're trying to maintain that level of muscle whilst actually cutting the fat out essentially. So it's these two kind of cycles. What I would highly recommend is doing what's known as lean bulking. So what that means is bulking and putting on weight in a very kind of small, very sort of gradual steps. So instead of just kind of like eating loads and loads of shit because you're bulking, actually consuming very, very small amounts, but increasing that in very small increments over time, because that means you spend less time later on having to cut. So it actually saves more time later on, so you can cut less and actually put on weight more sustainably in the future essentially. It's quite important though to figure out your maintenance calories, and the way to do that is that there's these things on the internet. You can just Google it, called a TDEE. So that stands for total daily energy expenditure. So that will kind of figure out just roughly kind of how many calories you need to kind of sustain your current weight, and then from there, once you figure that out, you can then kind of figure out whatever you want relative to your goals. So let's say you want to lose weight, you can then minus, let's say, 500 calories, and then you'll know exactly how many calories you need to eat for your goal, essentially, to lose weight. And likewise, if you want to lean bulk, you figure out your maintenance calories, and then you can add a few extra calories, which you can increase week by week or month by month, whatever. So let's say you're on let's say your maintenance is like 2,000 calories, If you wanted to lose weight, you could then start eating 1,500 calories for like the next month or two. And then let's say your maintenance was 2,000, but you wanted to, bulk up and start putting on weight and put on muscle, then you could do something like, let's go for 2,100 for 1 month. Then the next month go for 2,200. So that's like lean bulking. That's that. You can even go even smaller increments than that. You can even do something like 25 extra calories per week, or even less. You could do like 15 extra calories per week. And that way it'll be very, very small amounts of calories week by week, and that way you can actually put on muscle over time while still remaining pretty lean. So that's quite a good way to do it, in my opinion. And like I said before, it does save you time, which means that you don't have to kind of spend more time cutting in the future. And so in terms of what you actually eat, obviously you want to eat clean, you want to eat healthy. Obviously you want to still be eating your vegetables. That's important just for general health. But the key thing is, when it comes to putting on size, is the amount of calories that you're eating per day, as well as the amount of protein you're eating. So these are the two main variables: the amount of calories that you're eating and the amount of protein. The other macronutrients are also kind of important as well, but not as important. So like carbs, carbs aren't that important, but fats as well, because that kind of regulates your testosterone levels and other hormones, etc. But yeah, so for protein, you want to keep that at a certain level, at like a certain minimum level, I would say. So what that would be, to be scientific, would be 0.8 grams of protein per pound of body weight. I don't know exactly what that is in kg, but you can figure it out if you want to know it in kg. But yeah, that will be like the minimum amount of protein that you should be consuming, whether you're cutting or bulking. But obviously if you go a bit over that or under that, it doesn't matter too much, but that should be like what you're kind of aiming for generally. And then obviously calories, as I said before, that'll be worked out based on your maintenance calories, and how much you should be consuming to kind of bulk or cut, whatever your goal is. But yeah, in terms of what you should eat, it's kind of up to you. I mean, with protein, there's various protein sources. You've got your meat, you've got your dairy. That'll probably be the bulk of what you're going to be consuming. So chicken, eggs, milk, fish, etc., etc. If you want to be vegan, then obviously stuff like tofu and quinoa and stuff like that, I don't know, stuff like that, soy stuff. Soy, has got a bit of a reputation for being harmful to your testosterone levels and stuff. Most of that is bullshit. Like, you can still consume soy, just obviously if that's all you're consuming like all of your protein source from that, then yeah, maybe that could have some hormonal effect on you. But consuming a bit of that even every day is not going to have any impact on you. That's all kind of pseudoscience and rumors and stuff. So yeah, so that would be that. I mean, carbs doesn't matter too much. You got pretty healthy carbs like potatoes and rice. But other stuff as well, like pasta, bread, is fine as well, in my opinion. So yeah, and then obviously with fat sources, fat generally is a lot in kind of protein sources anyway. So like in chicken and stuff like that, you got a lot of healthy fats in that anyway. But there's also other stuff like nuts. Nuts are also very calorie intense as well. So you just have to be careful about what exactly you're consuming. So for example, like a good example of this is like one, reasonably sized banana would be the equivalent of like 1 glass of milk in terms of calories. So even though like, a glass of milk is just something you just drink and consume like really quickly, that actually has roughly about the same amount of calories as a banana, which if you consider the size is like, a little bit mind-blowing in a way. But that's really important to bear in mind, so just to have like an understanding of the amount of calories in the stuff that you're consuming. That's quite important, because it's easy to kind of make like little mistakes like that, and then you realize why you aren't losing weight quickly enough, or why you're putting on weight when you shouldn't be, etc., etc. It's just having that understanding about the amount of calories that are in the foods that you're actually consuming. as well as obviously, you know, lifestyle influences as well, like how much walking you're doing, or if you're running or doing other kind of physical exercise. That's obviously going to play a part. But you know, you should try to have an understanding of how many calories are in all of the foods that you're consuming. You don't have to be like super OCD about it, although you can. But you should have an idea of like roughly how many, you know, calories are in this portion of meat or this portion of rice, etc. You can research it on the internet. I would also recommend a website or an app called MyFitnessPal, because that's really helpful for like logging all the food that you're eating and then having an idea of how many calories you've consumed for the day. You know, you don't have to be like super OCD and like, you know, calculating the exact amount of calories and macronutrients and everything and weighing everything. You can do that, and that will obviously give you better results. But having a vague idea of the amount of calories that you're consuming, you know, is beneficial, and you should try to do that. But yeah, I mean, it's up to you how far you want to go with that. But obviously bear in mind, just be careful, like if you go out to a restaurant or something and you order something and it comes with all this like sauce and all this other stuff and flavorings and whatever they add to the food, that can really add up in terms of calories as well. So just bear that in mind. Just be a bit careful about that. Like if you don't eat out that much, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to kind of figure this stuff out. I mean, generally I would recommend trying to limit the amount of times that you eat out. And you know, when you are eating in, you know, if you just stick to some sort of like basic foods and basic meals, it will be a lot easier to calculate this stuff. And as I said before, you know, you can't indulge too much with food. If you're serious about getting into a really good shape, you know, you have to make sacrifices somehow. You know, you can't have everything. You've either got to, you know, be out of shape and like have this like junk food, or the other side, which is obviously eating clean, having an idea of how much you're consuming, and then obviously getting into a better shape that way. And in terms of actually getting stronger in the gym, you want to do what's known as progressive overload. So what that means is that you increase the intensity over time of the lifts that you're doing. So instead of just kind of going into the gym and just kind of, you know, benching or squatting a certain amount and just keeping it like that level for it, like forever and ever, no, you want to be ideally increasing some form of intensity week by week, ideally, at least at the beginning. Eventually you're going to plateau, but you know, at least at the beginning, yeah, you want to be increasing. So what that means is increasing the weight is one option. It can be like increasing the amount of reps you're doing, or increasing the sets, just increasing something. It could even be like reducing your rest time. It could be just doing more reps per set, that kind of thing. But it's good to kind of you know, if you can track it in your mind or on your phone, write it down. That's good. But you don't necessarily have to do that. The most important thing really is that you're hitting failure or close to failure in most of you. I'd say at least like half of your exercises. So half the sets of your exercises, they should be like really like a struggle towards the end. So let's say you do like 4 sets of a particular exercise. I would recommend trying to get to failure or close to failure in your last 2 sets, because that will really kind of stimulate, you know, your muscles, and it'll feel quite intense, at least at the beginning, but then you kind of get used to it. But yeah, that's what you want to be doing if you're really serious about, you know, putting on size and really kind of stimulating your muscle. Because yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily have to go that close to failure, but it will dramatically improve you know, the efficiency of what you're doing in the gym, for sure, 100%. You know, there's so many people that actually go to the gym and they just don't push themselves hard enough. They're not doing intense enough workouts, and then, you know, they don't get the results. So that's quite important, I would say. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Like I say, I mean, you know, doing this fitness stuff is going to have a massive impact on your obviously your dating, but also just like your general fulfillment out of life in general. You know, we spend so much time just sat on our asses doing sedentary activities, so like if you can do some kind of intense physical activity, it's going to have a big impact on your general kind of well-being and lifestyle health, and, you know, future health as well. Because, you know, like, you know, when you look at like old people, they're so like decrepit and just so, lacking in energy and ability to just do basic things like walking at a reasonable pace, that kind of thing. But if you like incorporate fitness into your life, just like throughout your whole life, you run into those problems a lot later in life. Obviously, there's going to come a point where you're not going to be able to like run anymore and that kind of thing. But it does massively delay that while it happens. So yeah, it's win-win. Fitness actually buys you time in life. That's the way I see it. Fitness actually buys you time because all those years that you spent not doing fitness it's almost like your body's kind of like withering away. Whereas if you actually integrate fitness into your life, it kind of buys you more time in the future. You'll live longer, you'll live healthier. So yeah, I'd recommend it for most people out there for sure, 100%.
Cheers for watching. If you'd be interested in one-to-one coaching with me where we'll go out in public and work on you approaching girls, or more generally with your social confidence, please visit my website ed-game.com.